I was on the brink of ruin. My debts were real, but the inheritance I received, the isolated, decaying Casa Lyra, felt like a miracle. My great-aunt Helena left it to me, but with a silent warning: trust no one. The house smelled of smoke from the fire, but the scent of betrayal was stronger. My fiancé, Lucas, and the lawyer, Elisa, wanted me to sell immediately, before I discovered the truth. Casa Lyra was not a ruin. It was a safe. And the secret it held was so powerful that they were willing to marry me just to steal it. This is the story of how my own wedding became the cruelest conspiracy, revealed by a burned map and an ambition that was buried beneath the floor of my new home. My name is Sofia, and at 28 I was technically bankrupt. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, painful erosion caused by a startup investment that evaporated faster than ink in a summer rain. A trained architect whose promising firm now struggled under the weight of debt, I watched my future, and my planned wedding to Lucas, slip through my fingers. Lucas, my fiancé, a financial consultant with ambitions larger than his salary, made no secret of his impatience. He saw my financial disaster as an obstacle, not a challenge to be overcome together. His favorite line, repeated at dinners and on calls, was, "You need liquidity, Sofia. Fast." It was amid this chaos that life took an unusual turn. Death. My great-aunt Helena, the only close blood relative I had left and whom I barely knew, had passed away. The inheritance was Casa Lyra, an isolated Victorian mansion in the mountains, known more for its mysteries and late Gothic style than its market value. The house had suffered a minor fire in the back wing months before Helena's death, an event that further isolated her from curious neighbors. The lawyer handling the inventory, Elisa, an elegant, cold woman with a kind of polished smile that never reached her eyes, handed me the keys with an almost irritated urgency. "It's a burden, Sofia. Overdue taxes, urgent structural repairs, and that small fire left its mark. I suggest we sell before the value drops further. I have a discreet, interested buyer." The air around Casa Lyra was thick, laden with the persistent smell of old smoke and the damp moss on the stone walls. The three-story house seemed to observe the world through narrow, dusty windows. Lucas, who came with me on the first visit, barely got out of the car. "It's a ruin, Sofia. A bottomless pit. It's time to be the architect of yourself, not a restorer of ghosts," he snapped, annoyed by the lack of cell service. The pressure to sell began there, immediate and coordinated. In the days that followed, Sofia's life became a constant negotiation. Lucas bombarded her with catastrophic financial projections, reminding her that the wedding depended on stability. "Be practical, Sofia. It's dead money. Do you want to marry me or live with ghosts?" Elisa, in turn, called daily with updates on pending fines and structural risks. She mentioned the discreet buyer several times, a real estate developer in a hurry to acquire the land. "He's your only quick way out, dear. Don't complicate things." Despite the overwhelming financial logic and suffocating pressure, Sofia felt a deep resistance. Casa Lyra, with its welcoming silence and decaying beauty, stirred something in her architect's soul. She saw potential, she saw history, where Lucas saw only debt. And above all, the coordinated haste of Lucas and Elisa smelled foul. They acted less like counselors and more like agents of a plan. I decided to ignore them. I called an old college colleague, Ricardo, a trustworthy structural engineer. I asked him for a secret structural assessment. Ricardo arrived and spent 2 days on the property. His findings were the first thread to pull. "The main structure is sound, Sofia. It withstood time and fire. And there's something strange. The stone foundation is much more robust than necessary for a house of this size. It seems to have been built to hide a bunker," he commented, looking at the basement base. That information gave me the first certainty. Casa Lyra was not a ruin. It was a fortress. And Lucas and Elisa were lying. From that moment on, I stopped taking Lucas and Elisa's calls. I lied, saying I was sick and needed rest. In truth, I moved into the house, determined to find the truth behind their obsession to sell it. I was no longer trying to save my wallet. I was investigating what had really happened to my great-aunt. I spent the first week examining every inch of the house, focusing on the details an architect would see. False walls, changes in masonry, floors that didn't match the rest. The back wing, damaged by the fire, was the most promising area. The charred wood did not hide. It revealed. The second floor, in Helena's old library, was where the autumn light entered the strongest. The shelves were empty, but the wall behind them looked strangely hollow. Examining the wood, I noticed something. One of the pegs holding a shelf was loose and rotated slightly. With a pounding heart, I turned the peg. An old mechanism clicked. A section of the bookshelf, carefully camouflaged to look intact, moved smoothly aside, revealing a narrow, vertical secret compartment inside the wall. I took a deep breath, smelling old paper and mold. Inside were two objects. A black leather-bound diary, with edges charred by the fire, but the core preserved. A piece of yellowed parchment, covered with complex drawings, unusual symbols, and what appeared to be a cryptic map. Adrenaline overcame fear. I had found something Helena wanted to keep hidden. Something the buyer and their agents wanted to destroy. I opened the diary. Helena's handwriting was elegant, but the first page was written in haste, almost illegible. They know about the Lyra Code. Lucas and Elisa. They are watching. I fear what Varela will do if he. The ink faded into a blur caused by the water used to put out the fire. I stepped away from the wall, breathless. Lucas. Lisa. The mansion wasn't a ruin. It was a safe. And the secret it held was so dangerous that it had cost my great-aunt's life. I held the proof of the betrayal in my hand, but I needed to decipher the code to know what exactly Lucas and Elisa were trying to steal. The night fell over Casa Lyra, but I didn't turn on the lights. The adrenaline of holding the burned diary and the enigmatic parchment kept me awake. My great-aunt Helena hadn't died, she had been silenced. The ink smudge in the diary was my main obstacle, but the mention of Lucas and Elisa and the reference to Varela, a possible allusion to the robotics empire dominating the news, were sufficient proof of the conspiracy. I spent the night analyzing the parchment. As an architect, I quickly recognized that it was not a geographical map, but an architectural diagram to scale. The parchment showed the floor plan of Casa Lyra, but with an anomalous section. A circle marked with the symbols C7 and L9 beneath the basement foundation, directly below the original fireplace. Helena's diary revealed the rest. In the last legible pages, she described her life's mission, protecting the Lyra Code, a set of land ownership titles in Europe, rich in a rare industrial mineral, and patents for a water filtration process developed by her father, my great-grandfather. The value was not in the mansion, but in what the mansion concealed. Helena was about to hand over the Lyra Code to the embassy but realized she was being watched. The fire had been an attempted murder to force Helena out and to destroy the files. She survived the smoke, but the trauma and isolation made her vulnerable, facilitating perhaps a second and fatal accident. Lucas and Elisa didn't want the house. They wanted the land. The robust foundation was actually an isolation chamber for the documents, designed by my great-grandfather in the 1930s. They knew the documents were there and used the pressure to sell to gain unrestricted legal access to the property. With the secret of Casa Lyra in hand, the next piece of the puzzle was the personal involvement. My intuition led me to Elisa's office in the city. Under the pretext of delivering more documents, I used my engineering knowledge to briefly disable the security cameras and look for any evidence. I found a discreet folder. Lyra Property. Acquisition Phases. Inside there were reports on mining feasibility, not civil construction. And the final shock. A recent, crumpled photo of Lucas and Elisa kissing on a yacht, dated 3 months before the fire. They were lovers. Lucas's haste to marry me was just a tactic to gain privileged access to the inheritance. My engagement was an elaborate fraud to steal a family treasure valued at hundreds of millions of euros. The anger gave me an icy clarity. I was no longer going to run from debt. I was going to build a path to justice on the ruins of betrayal. I called Elisa and Lucas, separately, and agreed to the sale. You win, I said, forcing a tone of despair. I can't take the pressure anymore. Let's sign the sale on Saturday at Casa Lyra. I want to say goodbye to my great-aunt at the place. Lucas was euphoric, barely containing his triumph. Elisa maintained a professional tone, but her rush to set the time revealed her greed. I used the following days to prepare. With the help of my engineer colleague Ricardo, who was already aware of the conspiracy and the structural soundness of the basement, I set the stage for the confrontation. Most importantly, I located the German embassy's lawyer, responsible for registering the family's European land titles, and informed him about the missing documents and the conspiracy. He agreed to be near Casa Lyra at the time of the sale. On Saturday, the weather was heavy, with low fog hanging over the property. Lucas and Elisa arrived together, smiling tensely. They brought the contracts and the promise of payment. The signing table was set up in Casa Lyra's old living room. So, Sofia, Lucas began, reaching for the pen. The drama is over. Sign and you'll be free from debt. I picked up the pen but didn't sign. Instead, I stood up slowly, calmly, and walked to the library shelf. I turned the secret peg and the shelf opened. Before I sign, I said, my voice echoing in the silence of the room. I want to show you what I discovered during my cleaning of the house. Lucas and Elisa went pale. The color drained from their faces like the glow of a fire fading. The fire was convenient, wasn't it, Elisa? I continued, looking at her. It almost destroyed Helena's diary. But it didn't destroy enough. I picked up the diary and threw it onto the table, revealing the photo of Lucas and Elisa on the yacht. Lucas's smile crumbled into panic. You wanted the Lyra Code, Lucas, I said, looking at my ex-fiancé. Not my hand. You wanted the land titles, the patents. You and Elisa, the lawyer who should have protected my great-aunt, were lovers conspiring to rob me through a fake marriage. Elisa tried to flee, but the door was locked. The most ironic thing, I concluded, picking up the parchment and spreading it on the table, is that you failed. The haste to sell to the Varela developer was not for home building. It was for industrial exploration. And your purchase check, Lucas, is just a piece of paper. Because Casa Lyra is not for sale. Neither is the land. At that moment there was a firm knock on the door. I opened it, revealing the embassy lawyer and 2 police officers who were waiting for me. Gentlemen, I said, turning back to Lucas and Elisa, whose ambition had caused them to trip at the altar of their own betrayal. The Lyra Code is safe. And you have a meeting scheduled. Not with the developer, but with the authorities. The final shock was total ruin. They were led away, handcuffed, their whispers of despair muffled by the mountain fog. Casa Lyra, which looked like a ruin, was actually the foundation of a new fortune. I, the architect who almost went bankrupt, was now the heir to a priceless legacy. Casa Lyra was finally my home. Clara chose her peace over their pretense. She walked away, leaving behind a silence they could never fill. Do you think Clara's silence was the ultimate victory, or should she have never looked back at all? Let me know your thoughts on this powerful revenge story in the comments below. If you've ever had to walk away for your own sanity, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of self-respect and earned closure.